Charles Manson. This is a brief video regarding Charles Manson and his connections to the CIA and very likely MK Ultra. This is a popular topic recently due to Tom O'Neill's book, Chaos, and he's exposed a few very interesting pieces to the puzzle. So with this, I'm trying to do a quick overview of some things I've discovered over the years that may help put all the pieces together. And hopefully Mr. O'Neill will hear this. And if he gets just a slight little bit of information, that would be fantastic, because it's sometimes the smallest piece of information that can really help solidify a concept. So let me go through this as quickly as I can. For those who don't know about MK Ultra, it was a mind control experimentation done by the CIA from the early 50s through to 1980 or so. Some people believe it continued on. I believe that. I don't think it ever stopped. And during the fall of the Nixon administration was when people started getting nervous, and they were afraid that this information would come out because it was secretive experimentations and illegal. They were doing medical experiments on all kinds of people without their knowledge or consent. Completely illegal. People should have gone to jail for it. And in 1975, there were investigations into it called the Church Commission or Church Committee. And they found many things, some files that weren't destroyed. They found a limited number of those that gave them an idea of what was going on with the various MK Ultra programs. And they didn't have all the files because the head of the CIA, Richard Helms, had them destroyed or hidden, which was also illegal, and he should have gone to jail, but everybody seemed to get away with it. And they were doing experimentation on people in universities, hospitals, prisons, mental facilities were used a lot, and in some cases things like orphanages. Now, part of MK Ultra was the fact that they were consulting and using Nazi doctors, actual doctors from Germany that were brought over as part of Operation Paperclip. And even the famous Joseph Mengele was used and consulted because they had done experimentation over there, and they used their knowledge over here to continue and try to do things like create mind control assassins, for example. Some people believe the assassins in the 60s and 70s were created that way. Let's beyond the scope of this, but I want to get to Charles Manson next. Now, what we do know about him is his father is unknown. There's some belief he was a colonel, but it's really unclear. He had a prostitute for a mother and a very upheavaled childhood. He was in and out of jail from a very young age, in and out of schools and homes, and ended up in orphanages, and he ended up in Boys Town, and he was supposedly sexually abused there. There's also discussion that he sexually abused other boys, and that's all a big mess. But what's interesting is Boys Town is famous for abusing boys, and they have connections to a specific church. And some people believe there might have been mind control experiments done there. So I wanted to mention that. And so he was in and out of jail, and then later he was seemed to be recruited or something like that. And that's what Tom O'Neill gets into a bit. But all of a sudden, he seems to have some money and some direction, and he is sent into the Haight-Ashbury area to, it appears, to infiltrate the hippie movement, which he didn't really like and he wasn't part of. He has mentioned that in interviews. And he goes into the hippie movement and infiltrates it and is dealing drugs. And it's funny enough that LSD was brought into the country and promoted and distributed for free in a lot of cases by the CIA, the same people who brought the Nazis into the country via Operation Paperclip. So what the concept here is, the way I understand it, is they were trying to undermine the peace movement, the anti-war movement. So they brought in drugs to get everybody high, and therefore people would be completely unable to organize and do anything. And then eventually they turn this into having like a killer cult to discredit the entire peace movement. That would be your Manson family, and I think there were others as well. There's other different operations going on. All kinds of crazy murders and things were happening in the early 70s, around the time that Nixon was being investigated. There was all these beautiful distractions that just happened to come up. And as Tom O'Neill had mentioned, Manson was being monitored by the police, and they knew he was transporting drugs and things from San Francisco, for example. So he was on parole, and he should have been instantly put in jail for this, but they were allowing him to do it. And then also he was in Haight-Ashbury, and he was often visiting the clinic there, which was being run as a front. It was part of MK Ultra. That's official now. And one of the people running the clinic was Jolly West, one of the heads of the MK Ultra program. And Manson was visiting that clinic regularly and bringing his women there to be treated, etc. So we have a direct link to that. Now, here's the other aspect I want to bring up that some people may not know. The Nazis that were brought into the country via Operation Paperclip, many of them were brought in via the U.S. Navy and via a particular young lawyer named Richard Nixon. He was part of the program and responsible for giving many of the Nazis new identities. So isn't it strange that you would have the president of the United States, who's fighting a war in Vietnam, who's against the peace movement, that he would somehow have MK Ultra involved with undermining the peace movement, which was against the Vietnam War and causing him trouble? I think the odds of this are just unfathomable, really. It's just beyond belief. So I just wanted to put all those pieces together and give you some food for thought on some of the possibilities here. And what are the odds of this, that these types of people would be used to undermine the peace movement, to help the president? Oh, and in closing, Manson also mentioned in numerous interviews that he was working for Nixon, or he hinted at it, that he was helping Nixon, working for Nixon, or Nixon owed him. I wonder why he'd say that.
There can't be pretrial publicity. If there is, the case is set aside. Now, that's exactly what Mr. Nixon, who is a lawyer, I don't know whether he's a good or a bad lawyer, but I don't see how he could have made the slip that he did, that Manson is guilty. They should stop that trial right now, because that case will end with a conviction. Manson will be sentenced to death, It will take 2 years to get that on up on appeal. After it's up on appeal, it will be reversed. It will cost $2 million. It'll come back on down. 5 years from now and be retried as a result of the pretrial publicity, which was the President of the United States remark that Manson is guilty. Now, that is the grossest, most dramatic, abrasive remark of pretrial publicity, and by a lawyer who's President of the United States that I've ever heard. But you can't have that anymore. That was a remark that I thought that he might have Mr. Agnew say rather than say himself, but he let that one slip out.
Then what chance do you think does someone like Manson of a fair trial at all if the trial hasn't been stopped when the remark has been made by President?
Well, he doesn't have any chance at all. To get a conviction, he'll be sentenced to death, and it'll be reversed. He'll be brought back and retried. And by that time, I think capital punishment in the United States will be outlawed. I don't think that Saran. I think that I'll have something to do, and there'll be an announcement on the Saran case when I get back to the United States. I'll have something to do with that.
Can I ask you a question? Mm-hmm. Remember you had an X years ago and you changed it now to a swastika?
No, I never changed. It's been the same thing all the way along.
Wasn't it always an X?
No, it never was.
What's it stand for?
It stands for whatever I mean it to stand for, and whatever I make it stand for, and whatever I want it to stand for.
But you didn't one time say you were Xing yourself out?
No, that was your newspapers that gave you that.
What does it stand for you?
It stands for many things. It would take 2 or 3 weeks to explain all the things that I've built.
Can you give me an example?
In the image. Certainly, I can give you an example of the United States flag of America.
The swastika?
The rising sun in the Japanese flag, the Star of David to the Israelis, whatever country or nation or people or cause has always had a symbol.
And that's your symbol?
That's mine. I put that there from 2 or 3 other symbols. I didn't want to put a Christian symbol, and I didn't want to put an Antichrist symbol, and I didn't want to put a pro-communism, and I didn't want to put an anti-thermoflacaflop and all that kind of stuff that you play.
But it is a swastika. That would be Germany, wouldn't it?
No, that's not a Nazi. Hitler got that sign from mysticism and reversed it. He did the same thing, only he did it backwards. You know, it's the thought still here, just like the thought that he picked up was there when he picked it up. The thought has always been here. And then I think that he wants everyone to know that I'm not really the guy that you think I am, but the guy that you made me.
How did we make you?
Well, you raised me from childhood.
How? In what respect are you?
Well, when you have a child that nobody wants, he's always sent to boys' school, orphanage, reform school, or someplace like that. And then they keep him till he gets to be an old man.
Were you beaten as a child?
That hasn't really got anything to do with anything.
Were you abused as a child?
Well, we're all abused now and then. That's not really an issue to anything.
What is the issue?
Not your question. I want to ask you a question.
Sure.
I want you to give this question a lot of consideration. You don't have to answer me now, but can you imagine what it would be like to be interrogated by the SS?
I don't know whether I could imagine it or not.
Think about it.
Well, I know what their tactics are.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Can I answer it after the interview?
There's no doubt about it, is there?
Can I answer it after the interview?
Very serious, isn't it?
Sure it is. Can I answer you after the interview?
No, you don't have to answer me. You can just think about it
I will.
in your everyday
Okay.
doings.